Pattaya City Expats Club is a non-profit social organisation and our speakers are volunteers. The club as such assumes no responsibility or liability for the professional reputation of or the quality of services provided by the speaker today.
A teacher and goodness knows what, and very peppered with all his adventures in Pattaya. Joking. All right, so I'm going to hand over to Short George here, who's going to tell you some tall stories about how to use your life to create stories. Great. Thank you for doing this, George.
Thank you very much, Ren. Yeah, my plan today is just to give you an avenue in which to share your experiences with other people. And I'll tell you how I came about this. I have a very loving daughter who would listen to my stories for years on end. And she made a suggestion that I should write a book about my experiences. So this book took me 75 years to do. And I figure if I live to be 150, I'm going to write the sequel to it. So that's my plan. So anyway, my daughter saw this advertisement on the World Wide Web for a company called Storyworth. And Storyworth, what they do is they will help you to write your stories. And what they did was every week they would send out a question for me to answer. And then I would look at the question. If I didn't like it, I'd send them back and tell them, I don't like that question, so they'd send me another one. Then when I found a question that I liked, I would go through my photo archives, which I have about 15,000 photos, and I would pair the photo with the story that I was going to write. And so I had time to do that, but I want to remind you about one thing. I am retired, so I do have a lot of time. When I retired, my daughter was worried that I wouldn't have anything to do, so I told her that I found a job. I got a new job. And what happened was I was offered a job at the Kaiser Permanente Hospital in the circumcision ward, which I thought was a pretty good gig. So when I went for the interview, I asked him, well, how much are you going to pay me? And the guy goes, well, that's where we have a problem because we can't pay you too much. So we're going to be paying you about $20 an hour, but the bonus is it's plus tips. And so I didn't accept the job. Anyway, that's not one of my stories. So I'm going to try to get this to go up to the next one. Here we go. This is the Storyworth. You can Google this, do a Google search for Storyworth, and they'll take you to their website. This is when I finished the book. They sent me this. The review was that I'd done 342 pages, which is about 52 chapters. Now, when I did this book, I started out by writing on my iPad. It has a keyboard. And I would write every day. But my battery kept dying on my iPad, so I got a little bit pissed off. So then I started doing it on my iPhone. And I wrote 342 pages of the book on my iPhone. And it was, my eyesight was pretty good when I started, but by the time I finished, I needed glasses. It was that bad. But anyway, so what you want to do is you want to Google Storyworth, and you get to their page, and they'll take you through the whole process. And what they do is they charge you, I think it was $29, and then they will give you 1 year, and they'll send you a prompt every week, and you write the prompt, and then when you finish that, the next week they'll send you another prompt. So you do this and you've got 1 year and you just keep writing and following their prompts. And which is good because it kind of keeps you on track. And some weeks I would write 5, 6 chapters of stories. And I'll give you an example of the stories that were in the book. I've got the chair here for a purpose. When I was younger and just graduating from university, I had an opportunity to move to Australia. So I moved to Australia, and when I got there, I didn't have any place to live. So a lady at the airport said, "You can come and stay with me, pay room and board, $10 a week," which was $40 a month, room and board, and I've got a place for you to stay. So I said, well, yeah, okay, I'll go do that. So I moved in, and she had a bungalow out the back. And where I lived, this is in 1971 or 72, no indoor plumbing, only an outhouse in the back, no color TV, no FM, so it's pretty rustic. Anyway, I get there the first night, and she goes, "When you wake up in the morning, there's no bathroom in the house. You have to use the outside outhouse." She said, "When you get in there, make sure you lift up the lid because there could either be a big spider or a snake in there. So be a little bit careful." So I go, okay. So I get up the next morning, and I go, it's a 2-seater, and I sit down, and I'm doing my business, and all of a sudden I can feel some air coming up between my legs. And I think, what the heck? So I look down between my legs, and there's a man staring at me. There's a guy looking at me. I'm so shocked, I don't know what to do, so I just say, "Good morning," and he goes, "Good eye," and then he shuts the door. What the lady didn't tell me was that once a week, a man comes, and he's called the Dunny Man, and he has a big barrel, and what he does is he swaps the bucket out every morning, Monday mornings, but she didn't tell me that, so I went back in, and I go, "There's a man looking at my butt." He goes, "Oh, that's the Dunny Man. He comes every week." So that was my introduction to Australia, which I thought was a little bit unusual, but I survived. I lasted there for 10 years. So that's the kind of stories that I was writing in the book. And they're just stories that I had told my daughter over the course of 20 years. And so I get a prompt, and then, like, one of the prompts was, "What was your dad like?" So I had to relay the story. My dad, all his relatives, his mom and dad are from Finland. So when they moved to America, he had a large family, and he had a brother, Walter and Matt, and a couple of daughters. Anyway, the family was getting quite large, so they decided to move into town, and they were building a new complex for the family, and they were putting in a closet. And in the closet, they need to have a long bar, what we call a doll. And so they sent Walter down to the lumber company to get this long doll hang the clothes on. So Walter went down to the lumber yard and said, "I need a 10-foot pole for our closet." So the guy sold it. So Walter's walking down the main street of the town with a pole on his shoulder, and he's got about halfway down to hear someone holler out, "Hey, are you a pole vaulter?" And Walter looks across the street and says, "No, I'm a Finlander, but how did you know my name was Walter?" So that's the kind of stories that you can, generate, that you hear from. So let me get to the next slide. What I'm encouraging you all to do is, they have Ancestry.com and 23. Oh, these are some of the questions they would send me, like my first job, my 21st birthday, what are your favorite movies, and so on. So you get those prompts every week, and you can tell your stories. So here's another one: favorite toys, making of a bad idea, my first boss, and so on. Crazy things. I can probably relate one story. When I was in Australia, I was on doing a tour around Australia on a charter bus. I was going from Sydney to Perth, which is about 3,000 miles on the longest single stretch of highway in the world. There's a single stretch that goes 1,500 miles. So I'm on this bus with 10 other individuals, and we're going across the Nullarbor on this straight stretch, and we're getting bored. So I looked up at the ceiling and I noticed that there was an emergency exit at the top of the bus. So I thought, look, we're going during the day, why don't I open that up and I'll crawl up and I'll lay in the luggage rack and I can sunbathe while the bus is going down the highway. So that's what I did. So I was up there, and after about an hour, someone popped their head up and goes, "What are you doing?" I go, "I'm getting a suntan up here in the luggage." I said, "Oh, great idea." So a couple more got up there. As the bus went down the road, at one time we had 10 people up on top of the bus going down the highway. And I looked up at one point and I saw flashing lights. It's the police, highway patrol. They turn around and they chase the bus down, they stop the bus, and by that time we'd all gone down through the hole and we're sitting like regular people. And the officer got on the bus and he goes, "Excuse me, but I just went by this bus and there appeared to be 9 or 10 people up on top of that bus. I want you to all get off the bus, and I think I'm going to have to bring you and get arrested." So we all stood outside the bus. The only problem was the officer was about 5'5". The shortest guy on that bus was me. We had a guy who was 7'1", another guy 6'10". So the officer is coming up and going like this to us, pointing his finger out in our chest and said, "You guys are very bad boys." And we promised that we'd never do it again. And we got back on the bus and we went down the road. About 5 minutes later, I looked at that hole and I thought, you know what? I'm going to go back up there. So I ended up riding up on the top of the bus all the way to Perth. So I was on that bus for maybe, like 2 weeks, but I think I was on top of that bus for about a week. And by the time I got to Perth, I was beet red. I had so much sunburn, but that's just another one of those stories. When I finished the story, what they do is they told me that I had to go through and edit all the pages. And I'm so lazy that by the time I got that, so they sent me this backup. And what that allowed me to do is go through every page of the book. And if I wanted to, I could print it out, but I didn't feel like printing out 342 pages. So what they do is that they'll print as many copies as you want. And I thought this was pretty apropos. I thought it would take a little bit longer, but it is a piece of cake, by the way. I put this in the book because when people come up and ask me what my name is, my response is usually, "My name is Wilson. Perhaps you've heard of my balls." And I usually get a kind of a, "What did you say?" Anyway, I think that would have been a good cover. I've been in I've been in Thailand for almost 20 years, so sometimes I get those. That's what the final copy looks like. And the title is Sane versus Insane, because sometimes I cross that line and it's almost every day. But I got to pick out the color of the book, the title and all that. You fill that in when you finish the book, so it's a pretty easy process. So my thing to you is, if you're interested in keeping track of your life and you want to share it, this is a very good vehicle. And it's a good way to share with your family or maybe friends. And like I was telling my friend Mike, when my friends heard this, the first thing one of them wrote back was, "Hey, I think the statute of limitations is up. You can tell some of your stories." So he said, "I think this would be a good idea." Because when I was younger, I was a little bit of a little bit of a hellraiser, and I did some things that I probably not too proud of, but I didn't put those in the book because I don't believe in the statute of limitations. I think it might be. Anyway, so if you're interested in writing a story about your life or you want to share it with them, Google Storyworth. I'm not getting any money from Storyworth, but Google them. And if you're interested, here's a good way to share some of your stories. And that's about it for me. Questions, if you have any?
What if your story's already written? How can they help you either package it, put it together, and how many copies will you get, and how much do you pay per copy?
Okay, as far as helping you out with it, once you write an article, every week I'd finish it, and what happens is a copy would go to my daughter, and a copy would go to my sister. My sister's an English major, and she's really good with a red marker. So she would go through and say, oh, I think you need to edit this, you need to edit that. So that's one way of doing it. At the end of your 1 year and you're ready to do the final draft, what they'll do is they send you alerts that say, oh, we think you have some problems on page 27, please go and check. Or you have problems at some part of the book. So they send you some updates on that one. But the final revision and all of the any editing, you have to do yourself. When you're finished, they'll send you 2 free copies, and then anything after that you have to pay for, and I think it was like $29 or $25. And the book can be as large as 450 pages. So that's what you get. Oh, you've already written your book?
Yeah. That's what I said. I've already written the book. How can Storybook or Story, what do you call it? Story something. Storyworth. How does Storyworth help me either publish the book or put it together or package it or whatever?
If you've already written the book, you have to contact them, but I think what you'd have to do is you send them your manuscript, and then they would print it for you. They have no affiliation with like Amazon or whatever. They'll just print the book, but you've already got the hard work done. And I'm sure you got some interesting stories, so contact them. They're based in Connecticut. So they're a US company. The man that runs the company is originally from Sweden, and he got started because he would go home to visit his father in the summer, and his dad was always telling stories. So when he started thinking, hey, you know what, Dad? I'm going to figure out a way that you can transpire your stories from what you're telling me to the hard page. So that's how that started. So the one nice thing about this book idea is once you've written it and it's in hard form, it's there forever. I mean, it's not like if you have like pictures. Like I can remember growing up and my mom would tell stories and she had pictures like in the photo album, but she never wrote on the back who it was. When my mom passed away, I got albums of people, I don't know who the hell they are. And there's no way of me getting, unless I can talk to the other side, which I don't do very often, but there's no way. So this is kind of a good way, a concrete example of keeping those memories in a hard copy form. It's there forever. So it's just an idea. So
That's 2, Roger.
you can go A and B.
Did you make any attempt to contact any other publishing source before you went to them?
No. Okay. It was a gift from my daughter to me.
Hi. Do you think the emergence of artificial intelligence changes anything in terms of the process that you're suggesting? Not that AI would create stories for you, but just help you make it more interesting?
Well, the easiest thing for me was, as far as creating stories, was I would just look through my pictures. And after going through 18,000 pictures, I'd see a picture, I go, hey, I remember when I took that picture, and I remember what was going on. So it was kind of recall for me. So that was a very easy way to do it. And then sometimes I would get suggestions from my friends, but after a while their suggestions they weren't my friends, because the suggestions weren't very good. I didn't think they were very good. But anyway, it's just another way.
AI would help you if you don't have anything to say. It would make up your life for you.
Not necessarily correctly.
No.
So it sounds like this format is primarily for more of an autobiography. It reminds me of the StoryCorps series, where people would go into booths with their relatives and they would share recorded stories, and that was a thing that happened in the United States. But is it primarily for that, or can you use it? Does it give you prompts for other subject matter, like I want to write a fiction book, or I want to write a research book?
No, it's not for that. It's more or less just writing personal stories. So I think it's just a good avenue to do it. And then the other thing is, I was thinking about when I was growing up, my mom was doing the audio tapes, and this is kind of the same thing. She's just recalling about people who she grew up with, or she mentioned people that I had no idea of. And the same with my dad. I didn't really get a chance to really do the 20 questions with my father until he was in his 90s. And then I remember when he was 96, all my brothers got together and we started really asking the hard questions. But we should have done that because once they're gone, those stories vanish. And then you got nothing to hold on to. So I just thought, well, this is a good way. I can leave a legacy for my daughter, and then if she ever, someone asks her about me, she can say, well, according to my father, in chapter 22, he said this. So it's kind of it's a two-edged sword. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, because sometimes the story, she goes, oh, Dad, you didn't really do that. And I go, well, yeah, I really did, but you wanted to hear the rest of the story, so there it is. So now it's in hard print, and I can't get rid of it. There's no delete button. It's already printed, so you got to live with it.
Over here.
How hard was it to resist temptation and not embellish the stories a bit?
I've never embellished anything in my life. It was a fairly easy process. Like I said, the hardest process was doing it on my phone. I was just sitting there and I'm looking at it thinking, Jesus. And then someone suggested that I just turn on my phone so you just talk and it prints it out. But I didn't realize I could do that until chapter 51. So I was pretty much screwed to the wall. But that's just the way it is.
Just
Ren, you want to use mine?
just following on from a couple of the questions. Roger, if you go to Amazon, you can publish a book on Amazon. You can self-publish. It's free. You can get it put into a Kindle format. Yeah, or they will print it out, and their printing costs are a lot less than what they said, and you can get a choice of paperback and hardback. In a couple of weeks, we've got Sukhan Sethi coming down, very fascinating guy who's reinvented his life with bikes and books and stuff, and he's going to talk. He publishes in Thailand, so he has a printer thing that he prints books in Thailand, some interesting books. It's going to be an interesting talk. Yes, AI can certainly help you in the rewrite. So for instance now, and I suggested this to Daryl, when he nobody helped him out after somebody died, nobody helped him out with writing the articles for the newspaper, but now he gets the transcript of the talks done on YouTube. They will give you a transcript. And then he uses AI to say, could you turn this into a however many words article, newspaper article and stuff. So if there's material there, it can definitely rewrite it, etc. Okay, so that's... Now, I should also mention, I hope I'm not stealing your thunder. Years ago, we had a talk by a guy called David Lee about his life. He was the very first pop star in Taiwan and China, and he was known as Grasshopper. Hoping to get him back to re-give the talk. But anyway, he came to me and said, look, I want to write the story of my life. And I said, okay, let me tell you a story myself. I wrote this novel, and one of the primary people is a 20-year-old black woman in Los Angeles who's a waitress wannabe actress. So I got hold of a couple of books that were supposedly autobiographical about self-contained young black women of fairly loose morals, and they read like they were written by a white college graduate, and they probably were. It's probably ghost written. So I said to David, look, this is what you do. You get yourself a speech-to-text recognition. You talk your book into that. It turns it into written form. You get it transcribed, of course, comes out in words. And then you do a light edit yourself, right? And then you get a professional editor involved. And he said, thank you so much. I couldn't be more happy with the result, okay? Because it's his voice, but it's professionally edited. That's probably, if you really want to do a top job, not too many people can edit themselves as well as an experienced professional editor. So there's a few tips. For those of you who don't know, I have a background in writing. I've been published by Penguin and Bantam Doubleday Dell, and had a book internationally published, etc. When publishers used to publish books, So anyway, any more questions for George?
Sorry? I'm just
over here.
Take the mic back and walk around. Here we go.
Thanks for your talk. G'day, mate, by the way. And yeah. Yeah. The main thing I got out of your talk today was the only thing interesting that's happened in your life happened in Australia, which is sort of counter my experience. So, do you have any interesting things that happened in other parts of the world?
I do, but I can't really talk about them because there's ladies present. I was lucky because I spent my formative years, 10 years in Australia, and then after Australia, I went back to the U.S. because I wanted to continue my education because I figured I didn't get enough the first time around, and it was, so my time was in America, and it was kind of interesting because when I got back, I wanted to get a degree, a master's degree in supervision and leadership because I wanted to work in elementary schools. So I did that, and then I got a job working with elementary kids because they're just a constant source of entertainment every day. You never know what's going to come out of their mouths. So I did that for 18 years, and then one day I got in there to the office and I told my my supervisor, you know what? I've had enough of this. I think I'm going to retire. And she goes, how old are you? And I go, I'm 55. She goes, oh, you'll never survive. You'll never make it. If you retire now, you'll never make it. And I looked at her and I go, you know what? I'm going to prove you wrong. And I think she passed away, so I couldn't rub it in her face. But yeah, at 55, I just walked out the door and said, I'll see you. And then how I got here was I had a friend that was a pharmaceutical salesman, and his territory was all of Southeast Asia. He went to all the military bases and he sold pharmaceutical stuff. So one day he came back and he goes, you know what, George? I think when you retire, you need to move to Thailand. I think that's your best fit. So I said, oh, okay. So what he did was he typed out on a single piece of paper on both sides in 12 font every place I should go in Thailand. And he gave that to me. So what I did was I went down to the travel agent and I got a ticket to Bangkok. I took that piece of paper and I put it in my back pocket, and I arrived here in 2004 or 2005. And I started at the top of the list and I went down to every place and everybody that he mentioned. And it took me 2 weeks to make it to the list, and then when I finished, I went back home, and I got back home. I was home for 1 day, and my friend called me up, and he goes, so what'd you think? And I go, well, you're a real estate agent. I want you to sell my house. He thought I was joking, but I wasn't. So what I did was he sold my house, but what I didn't realize was my house was in a very popular area, and it sold in 1 day. So now I don't have a house, but I got a house full of furniture. So I went on Craigslist and I listed everything thinking, oh, it's going to take me a while. Within 1 week, I sold everything I own. Now I don't have a house. I don't have any furniture. I don't have a bed. What am I going to do? I had a ticket to come back to Thailand in 3 months. So what I did was I talked to my neighbor and I said, hey, look, I'm going to leave in 3 months, but I don't have anything. And he goes, I'll let you sleep in my living room on the floor on a mat. So he gave me a pillow, a blanket, and a mattress. I slept on his floor for 3 months with my suitcases by the front door. So that's how I got here. So then once I got here, I figured, oh, I've landed in heaven, so I'll be okay. So I came with 2 suitcases. If you go to my apartment now and you look, I still have the 2 suitcases. That's all I have. So I'm a minimalist. I cut down on everything, and I think that's the best way to do it. I don't own anything. I just have if I buy something, I throw something away. And so I don't have any clutter. And I keep all my money. I don't tell my daughter this, but I keep all my money in a special account with her name on it. So if I meet my demise, it's already in her name, and, you know, adios amigos. I hope I'm happy wherever I end up. Up, down, here, or around. I really don't care. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Over here, George.
Thanks, George. That was a great talk. One thing, I'm not quite sure what I want to ask, but I was doing a psychology degree at one stage, and they talked about narrative therapy, and that rewriting your story gives people a way to reprocess memories from earlier in their life that maybe weren't so agreeable, in a way that they can, with the wisdom of maturity and, you know, all the water under the bridge, that they can see them in a more positive way, and they might have some new insights about how their life was. And so it can be a really kind of great therapeutic and a wonderful thing for people to do this kind of story. Did you find that you had any of that sort of feeling as you put these stories together?
Well, some days when I would write, and I'd write the story, I'd think to myself, you know what? I just saved myself $85 an hour going to a shrink. So it can be good therapy. The other thing is, when writing that, you know, sometimes people say, oh, I have regret, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. Every day I wrote, I just go, boy, I'm lucky I got to do that. I'm glad I got to do that. So that, you know, to me, that was just reaffirming my original thought that whatever choices I made were probably pretty good ones, even though my dad sometimes called me a knucklehead. He goes, when I first told him that I was going to go to Australia, I remember my dad looking at me and he goes, well, where the hell is Australia? So I had to get the map out and show him where it was, and he goes, oh, that's a pretty big leap of faith. And I go, yeah, it is pretty far away. So in those 10 years I was there, I did 50 trips back and forth across. I would spend like a year, but the nice thing about it was, because I was playing basketball, every time I made a trip was never on my dime. Someone always paid for me to travel from Australia to the U.S., or if I was in the Philippines, they pay for. Well, I have one story. When I was in the Philippines, I was playing in the Philippine Professional Basketball League, and a friend of mine I was playing with, we decided about halfway through the season that we wanted to go back to the U.S. because it's Christmas time. So we talked to our sponsor, and he goes, "So what's the problem?" And he goes, "I'll buy your ticket." So he bought us a ticket going back. So we got on the plane in Manila, and we flew. Our first stop was to Honolulu in Hawaii. About halfway through, lightning struck the airplane, and the airplane did a drop. I don't know how many. The food cart went up in the air, and I looked over at my friend, and he was like white as a sheet. And I go, "Hey, it's okay. Relax. We're going to be okay. Why are you so nervous?" And he goes, "Well, I forgot to tell you that last month when I was in the Philippines, the plane I was on crashed on the runway, and I was one of the few survivors. I jumped out the window, and I survived. I jumped through the flames." So after that, I go, "Oh my God, let's have a drink. And you can have two." So that's just kind of the things that happen. But yeah, writing all those things, you start hearing all those stories, and then you start recollecting on those things, and then you kind of, in your mind, you start thinking, "Geez, did I really do that?" Or, "I'm really happy that I did that." So it's all about taking chances and so on. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. John, I was waiting for you. I knew you couldn't sit there without asking a question. So I figured if I kept babbling up here long enough, you'd come up with something.
Yeah, very good. Just how far can you go back in your mind? You know, can you translate back to your time when you were 5 or 6 or things like that? You seem to miss out quite a bit of your life and skipped over things you didn't want to talk about, but they sound interesting. Right? And I've still got my mind, and I can remember the Second World War, not the first, before anybody says. And I can remember being in a laundry basket with my brother because they were bombing the area, trying to hit the reservoir, and I was 3. And we used to be shoved in the pantry where the strongest place was the stairs. And I remember all those things. So it'd be interesting for you to start somewhere there and tell us a bit of the juicy bits. Thank you.
Well, you know, John, I was born in a cellar and was never brought up. That's my claim to fame. And, you know, I didn't go back too far because I think the first story was when I was probably about 9 or 10. But I didn't go back any further than that because my mind is, I was happy to get back that far. But it's a good idea. Okay, Rin, I need a certificate.
Yeah, no problem. I'll swap you a certificate for a copy of the book. You know. Oh, look. Notice how wonderful this frame is for this certificate, right? Do you know why it's so wonderful and better than usual? He gets the frames for the certificates. It's true. Wait, Sally, don't go.
Very funny.
Yeah, Davey says, you know, he's a tall guy. How tall are you, Davey? Just 6'4". But he feels short next to you.
Thank you.
So George, now I think you're going to have to throw out one of your old certificates.
This frame is very special.
We'll see it here next week, I think.
For those tall stories, George, it was a fun finding out. And who's tempted to check out, you know, Storyworth or get into explore?